Isis, this is actually how it's layered. This is page 43. It's 44. 43? 44. These costumes too, like what are these costumes, bro? This is not gonna protect you at all from anything. He's like, I'm gonna make you bulletproof. Bro, what? Look at all the skin. Like you're gonna get shot and you're gonna die. Like a weakling. Like again, this is what I mean by one hand, bro. Like freaky ass characters. Be me. You're in a server about reviewing webcomics and you happen to see one that someone linked named Mega Maiden, and you assume that because Mega is in the name, it's some kind of Mega Man comic. So out of interest, you click it and then, stay with me, you read 550 plus pages of this very comic that actually has nothing to do with Mega Man, and during that entire time, you end up definitely not enjoying your experience. Since not many things have Mega in the name aside from obviously Mega Man, I thought that this would specifically be about predominantly female Mega Man characters, OCs, or bosses in a slice of life setting. Instead, I got an extremely strange, vulgar, female-focused superhero webcomic for about 400 pages, and then for the last 100, I got something that I can call respectable and fun. Mega Maiden started in early 2012 and ended in 2014, only for it to have a 6-year period between then and its soft reboot in 2020. It has its influences in anime and post-reboot comics like Invincible, and the creator named Andeh, or Andeh, I don't know. It's A-N-D-E-H. I'm gonna just say Andy, okay? Andy's safer. Named Andy has been making comics since the 90s. With that small introduction of what this comic is, who the creator is, and his experience in comic making, now I can get into what I think of the comic and why I labeled it as a Gooner comic, despite it having no NSFW in it, and of course my actually normal critiques of the work. Pre-reboot. The comic takes two forms. The lines of where the reboot of the story starts is pretty blurry. By quality though, we get inklings of the story taking an upturn by chapter 16, where a side villain named Chopping Block is introduced, though just about every moment before this uptick in quality is just bad. The comic gets solidly good by chapter 21, but by then, you've already read 393 pages of mostly garbage, and this is what I'll be focusing on for the majority of the video and not post chapter 21 content for two reasons. For one, a lot of the stuff that happens in the first 20 chapters is still important for the stuff that happens after them for smaller context reasons or understanding the weight of some things that happen later. For example, if you skip to chapter 21, you'd never understand why our main character, Mega Maiden or Isis, hates Nega Maiden, since you would have skipped the chapters where Nega put Dee Dee into a coma, and even further back, you would have never understood how Nega even came about in the first place, as she's introduced all the way back in chapter 3. For two, this is the first half of the story, and obviously, most people when they watch or read something are going to start with the first episodes, chapters, or whatever. So it's basically guaranteed that everyone who decided to check this comic out had to start off with the pre-reboot version of Mega Maiden, i.e. 393 pages of nothing good, even though the comic literally becomes great after chapter 21. I mean hell, I read about 10 more chapters after 21 after this script was initially finished because I just liked it that much. And for clarification on why I call this a Gooner comic despite there being no NSFW or pornographic imagery in the comic itself, I do so because half of it has the energy of someone who just wants to make a comic with hot girls, which you can tell by the personality of the characters, character designs, and other strange moments. The energy of someone who really wants to make a good story is completely absent before chapter 16. I'll be getting into that very idea throughout this video, but first we need to talk about characters. Our main two characters named Isis or Mega Maiden and Dee Dee or Chop Chop Princess are complete Mary Sues that don't have to work for anything because they just get whatever they want. It feels like the author created these characters to just be powerful and hot, and with these two, that treatment isn't even equal. Isis at the start already has literal god powers with her tiara, which she got. Just look at this page. She got him so. This is so weird, bro. This is why I call it a Gooner comic. Look at this page. And her friend Dee Dee has the infinitely worse ability of just summoning axes. At the same time, at the start of the story, they go through no hard work or training in order to be seen as respected superheroes, and instead, Dee Dee and Isis immediately get accepted into a top superhero league by chapter 2 for beating a single villain, even after they attacked a civilian who was innocent due to a misunderstanding, which is the very first thing that they do as heroes. In fact, Isis especially is repeatedly shown to be incompetent, lazy, and extremely unempathetic, as a lot of the time she hears things that should make her suit up to do hero stuff, but she just doesn't. In chapter 5, she hears that people are getting set on fire, and she just says that the police should worry about it, as if she's not a superhero. Just for a small correction, it's actually Didi that says this and not Isis, but Isis only suits up whenever she hears that it's a supervillain. So if it wasn't a supervillain, she would not have suited up. And at the end of chapter 8, one of the members of the Young Idols, a group Mega Maiden briefly was a part of, literally dies, and she says that she doesn't care about it because she didn't know her too well. This is our main character, everyone. Isn't part of being a hero about selflessly saving people that you don't know? She's not likable in the slightest, as she continually does things like this, cries all the time like a baby, and makes stupid rookie mistakes while still having the status as a high tier hero. But don't misconstrue this with personality, as on top of this, I couldn't describe to you any of her or Didi's defining characteristics during these earlier parts of the story. This made it very hard to connect with them, as they did things like go and drink beer and have lame conversations about how easy it is to beat villains. About beer, for some reason, every female character enjoys and wants to drink beer. They all joke similarly. The non-main ones sometimes have names like Cockblock and Thunder Booty, and most of them are drawn to be the same as I'd say stock hot, including the teenagers. Lovely. Doomcloud, a character introduced in chapter 8, is coded to obviously be a teenage girl. She says things like, "Ugh, mom," argues with her little sister, loves video games, and since it was made in 2014, she loves surfing Tumblr. Yet, she gets the same character design treatment as the adult characters. She's busty and has a tight-fitting latex suit, though the author doesn't do too much with her after her initial appearance, so I assume he realized that this was kinda weird. In her small arc, she has no superpowers or real training when it comes to being a superhero, but she immediately finds a team that will accept her as a hero despite, again, no training or superpowers. And this group doesn't even seem to train her before she's put onto a team of other heroes that go fight in space. In short, all the female characters act similarly, most of them are built similarly, and despite that, I can only tell you things that they like and what's wrong with them, in the case of Isis, but I can't tell you about their personalities. For the male characters, it's rare to even see any. Dr. Clockwork and Smashbox have a pretty funny, caring dynamic as good friends, though we only see that displayed like twice. And outside of that, most of the other male characters are very one-note. Captain Awesome is just a jerk, but somehow he remains seen as a hero by the masses, even though it's established that, again, he's a jerk. All the other heroes know this, by the way. Why don't they just tell the masses that this guy sucks? Like, he's not that strong. It's not like Homelander or something. And American Riot just kind of exists. The initial joke of his character is that he seemed really strong, but Mega Maiden was stronger, I guess, in that he didn't care about helping anyone except Americans, though this is forgotten about and, at least in the reboot, remains as one note, but instead he cares a lot about Isis and Didi, though I don't have much of a problem with this since he's used somewhat strategically. Horrible power scaling. One thing that was extremely annoying about this comic was the power scaling. A solid example of nonsensical power scaling would be in chapter 3. A villain built a massive mech since she wasn't able to get superpowers, and with it is now causing some trouble, and Captain Awesome is able to easily beat her since she couldn't even scratch him due to him being a top hero within this verse. Though after Captain Awesome makes Mega Maiden mad by saying something fun, honestly really funny, she in the mech punched Captain Awesome, which is enough to cause him to give up the fight and admit defeat. This doesn't make any sense since the combo move Isis and the mech use is so much more powerful than the mech, and the mech is so much weaker than Captain Awesome, who's weaker than Mega Maiden. With such an insane power offset between Isis and the mech, it'd make the most sense if the mech's arm was simply destroyed by the force of the impact. This would be like if Saitama and Moomin Rider both punch Garou in the face and somehow Moomin both does additional damage to Garou and survives, or if Super Saiyan Goku and Yamcha both punch Frieza in the face on Namek. The only way either Yamcha or Moomin would be able to survive is if Goku or Saitama was holding back immeasurably, though if they did that, it wouldn't be able to hurt their foes. To prove what I was saying further, Mega Maiden even shows off that she's capable of damaging the mechs majorly, as she easily destroys it when she soon after punches Captain Awesome through the mech. After this happens, the mech fuses with the human piloting it, and somehow, her becoming a cyborg is enough to defeat Isis and Didi, even though Isis has god powers and was previously both able to destroy the mech by punching Captain Awesome through it, and before this point was established to have an ability to fly so fast that she can go into space, which is what she did to kill Damage, by punching him out into the vacuum of space super far. It's so crazy. So I need to clarify that this is actually a mistake. This is not Isis. This is some other character that was with them for a little while. While I was writing this, I actually misunderstood that Isis was flying here because of also how confusing the page layout is, which I'll be talking about later. But I misconstrued Isis with this character because Isis later, very soon after, is shown to be able to fly, because Like literally like 2 chapters after this, she's able to fly. So I accidentally misconstrued this with her being able to fly. So that was definitely my bad. Without even asking how exactly that fusing technology is supposed to work in its intended way, really think about that. How does that work? Does she like put scrap on it and then it's supposed to like fix a mech? That doesn't make any sense. Why in the world would a mech that fused down into a human being be enough to beat ISIS when the weaker character Captain Awesome was able to no-diff the mech previously? Why is that an instant power amp? It would have made more sense if she ran off to learn how to use her abilities to then come back to fight her characters. Another good example of confusing power scaling would be the later event where Isis loses her original god powers in chapter 4 due to the god within her, Tiara, rejecting her, which was how she activated her powers, by the way. Afterwards, she immediately gains new earth and gravity god powers that are way stronger than what she has, but for seemingly no reason, even though it's shown later that she can accidentally knock down entire skyscrapers. The same cyborg with the redesign, now named Maiden, comes back and beats both Dee Dee and Maiden effortlessly in the exact same way, except now suddenly American Riot is actually the strongest hero, and notice Maiden, like, what the hell? This guy was established previously to be way weaker than Maiden during the damage fight before she got a power up. There are other smaller inconsistencies, but these are the 2 biggest and most annoying ones to me. A smaller gripe is the characters not using their powers in obvious ways. A villain that should have definitely been more of a threat is Dr. Clockwork, since he has the ability to create devices that can make machines sentient, as he's done this with his assistant. He could theoretically also do many other things as well with machines like mass mind control. This ability obviously sounds completely broken, and that's because it is. So the question with that becomes, why doesn't he just make a robot army in secret somewhere alone, since he has the ability to create, as shown in his first appearance, a transmitter that can turn all robotic devices in the entire city into sentient beings. I also want to add on the fact that in chapter 12, Dr. Clockwork shot Maiden with a gun that knocked her out for a little while and also made it so that she could not use her powers. Now maybe this is just specifically for Maiden because he never uses this gun again for some reason, but if this gun works on other heroes and it can knock them out at the very least, this is extremely broken, and it makes less sense as to why Dr. Clockwork is not a top villain. It just doesn't make any sense, and his proficiency in creating technological weapons could have been used for more comedy and serious story beats if the story called for that. But that idea is thrown out for the later antagonist, Maiden, who in my opinion isn't as cool and full of variety as Dr. Clockwork's possible inventions, despite me still liking her. So what I don't understand is why didn't this guy already, how is this not a top villain? This guy can just sit in a lab all day and make machines all day. For months and months and months, just make a robot army and make sentient robots that are just loyal to him to make more robots. Like, he could just do that. Like, and can he do that to airplanes and stuff? Clockwork, give it up. Heh, how funny, Maiden, because you're too late. The device that lets me control machines is on my hand already. The plane is in place and the towers! Clockwork! No! Grammatical errors. This one's smaller, but the earlier parts of this comic make me have a total stroke when I read them because I keep thinking that I'm reading something wrong when it's just written wrong. This is also true for when the story actually gets good post chapter 20, though the grammatical errors are few and far between. Maybe I haven't read enough webcomics, but I've seriously never seen this many confusing, albeit hard to spot, grammatical errors in anything else. And to me, it shows that Andeh, more so, wanted to make a comic he thought was cool for himself with hot girls as opposed to something with a readable and solid story, given how much you'd have to rush if the grammar is this off in a lot of places. I've had that feeling as well, where I feel like I just want to rush it and get my ideas out on the page since I find them to be so cool, so I wouldn't be so surprised if that was the case for Andeh during these earlier parts of the story. Weird arcs and tonal shifts. Here's the thing that actually made me mad: the tonal shifts and weird arcs, and I can't think of a better prime example than Dee Dee's leaving arc. At the start of the story, it's established that Dee Dee inherited her powers from her dad, and his name is an Axe King, and he used to be a villain. The next time this is brought up is when, out of the blue, Dee Dee accidentally kills some civilians while they're fighting some bad guys. Then we get a big text wall about how Chop Chop has been fighting her true urges. Actually came out of nowhere. And how she feels ashamed because she has a familial villain legacy, before she runs off and becomes a villain for a bit. And this has some serious consequences. Sometimes sudden tonal shifts can work, like in Attack on Titan where Eren and his squadron went out to fight Titans for the first time, and then they realized how deadly doing that was. It was to show us that this isn't like other anime, and the series continues along with that same highly serious tone. or you could do a sudden tonal shift that was actually foreshadowed throughout the story through different moments that break the light tone naturally, as if the tone establishes a facade for what'll come later. All the author had to do was mention the fact that Dee Dee had these urges previously through her maybe being a bit too violent when fighting villains, or her confessing to Isis when they're just one-on-one. The first option would require Dee Dee to be more combatively relevant, which is difficult when Isis literally has god powers and she just has magical access. But the second option could have been easily possible. Either way, this wasn't foreshadowed, and we were made to believe that Dee Dee this entire time was supposed to be a good guy now despite her villainous origins. And through this extremely sudden and unwell warranted shift in tone, we're still supposed to take Isis's sadness seriously when just about nothing else in this comic ever was. In chapter 6, they basically end up hating each other, and they reunite in chapter 7 by playing a video game. Tone established is completely destroyed in a reverse way because all of a sudden, goofy stuff starts happening, and then we just go straight back to normal. Even then, throughout this arc, the tone bounced around like crazy from light to dark, and I was left with confusion as to what exactly I was supposed to feel, especially when it was also established that actually, Dee Dee didn't get her powers from her dad, but instead, she just kinda has them. They're genetic. She was just brainwashed into thinking she was a villain and the daughter of the Axe King, since the Axe King is sterile. I have no idea why the author decided to make up this last second retcon from a completely unknown character that never appears again in the most confusing and dumbest way possible. How does she even know that the Axe King, or Dee Dee's not dad, is sterile? Was he just giving away this information to his friends? Even if that was the case, it wouldn't make sense because this random character looks like she's around the same age as Dee Dee and Isis when the Axe King is old and retired from villainy. So not only was the tone completely destroyed, I now have to just accept this extremely weird retcon so that Dee Dee looks like a better person and we can just forget the whole villainous urges thing. Alternatively, it is possible that the author just didn't know exactly what to do with Dee Dee's whole urges thing and didn't know exactly how to write that in, so he just decided to destroy that from even being a thing. And this makes even less sense when you read later in the story when she's literally wearing the same getup as her father did in the 80s, so she knows how her father dressed, and clearly it's either a coincidence or she's literally respecting his name. It's so confusing and it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I still think it's a cool detail, and it would be if that was her actual genetic father and she decided to do what he did in a heroic sense. Still though, it's bad writing because it doesn't make any damn sense and this retcon is ridiculous. I mean, hell, she immediately gets over years of brainwashing just like that. All it takes is a random maybe villain, given the location of intermixing with heroes and villains named Flame War that you don't know, to say, oh, Axe King is sterile, which sounds like some kind of weird joke at his expense to instantly take away your urges and want to do evil. It's like how in Hell of a Boss, they rewrote Stella to just be plain evil in season 2 instead of justifiably mad at Stolas for cheating on her with Blitzo in season 1 in order to make us more sympathetic to him. Just like how Hell of a Boss could have been more interesting if they took that fault to Stolas seriously instead of retconning it for poorly written romance, it could have been far more interesting instead of her instantly getting over her brainwashing and learning from a stranger, mind you, that she's not related to her father by blood at all. Imagine if Dee Dee had multiple times where she let the urges win, and she and Isis have to talk about them, or they even have to fight sometimes since she keeps defecting to the evil side, which slowly kills the heroic image of Chop Chop Princess along with Mega Maiden due to their close association. That right there could have been some cool interpersonal drama since it lets us understand why Chop Chop keeps doing this, which makes us sympathetic to her even though she keeps falling back into becoming a villain over and over, and it makes Isis' relationship to Dee Dee closer since she sticks with her through her villainous phases. Seriously, unique multi-arc potential just gone because a random named Flame War laid out some secret information that she shouldn't even know. In some other smaller ways, I'm not sure exactly how I'm supposed to feel. Like when a hero from the Young Idols in chapter 8 is shot in the head and killed by an alien, was I supposed to laugh even though she was the good guy? Or way later, right before the soft reboot's complete in chapter 17, was I supposed to feel good about Captain Awesome dying when he hasn't done anything wrong since chapter 3, which by the way is 269 pages. Yeah, from chapter 3 and 17 is 269 pages, i.e. in the universe years, and he does nothing else wrong between that time. He probably changed by then, and given his way of speaking, it makes me think that he might just be a different guy. Or was I just supposed to feel nothing? And in chapter 12, I know I was supposed to laugh when the one superpowered city cleaner said that the big guy liked legal lollies, but that phrase feels so incredibly insane when you could just say petite or thin, which is infinitely less creepy, and it had me thinking about the odd implications of that phrase. Don't think too hard about it, you will feel weird. Bad villains. Most villains basically don't do anything or they're confusing giving their power. Dark Siren is supposed to be powerful, but after she tells Dr. Clockwork to make that signal so that all posthumans, which are basically people with superpowers in this world, to be under her, she never appears again. And that plan goes nowhere. I already talked about Clockwork, but the guy basically does nothing throughout the story despite him having the potential to be the most dangerous villain easily. And a lot of the time, villains are treated as just bad guys of the week that Mega Maiden has to clean up. It would have been easier to simply not make extra character designs for villains and instead use the previous villains that were already established in interesting ways, but instead who you think might be important later never ends up being so, or they're introduced and they're so weak that it doesn't matter. The most that we get is Robo Nina or Nega Maiden after her first appearance, though that's post-reboot stuff and that doesn't cover the first 17 to 20 chapters before the soft reboot happens. In short, sometimes it's okay to just not have a consistent force three characters have to fight, sure, but this comic wants to have its arcs, it wants to set up bad guys, and it wants to make the adversaries believably dangerous. Though the comic is able to do this after chapter 15 or so, with Nega Maiden putting Dee Dee in a coma for a substantial amount of time, which is almost like a redo attempt of the first Chop Chop turning to a villain arc. The comic just isn't able to do this pre-reboot. Confusing paneling, pacing, plus art review. Isis, this is actually how it's layered. This is page 43. It's 44. 43? 44. Like, we don't see Isis say anything. She's not getting more powerful or something. And it's been established that now she can fly. So she grabs this guy up. This is so bullshit. The art pre-2020/reboot is very clunky in some places, and just by looking at it, you can tell that it's very 2013-esque. It looks like it could be a style of a Flash cartoon you saw back in the past on YouTube as a kid. It's definitely not bad or anything, and for comics, generally the art quality is less important than the story, and it usually works well enough to where fights have a solid enough flow. Again, definitely not bad, but not the greatest either, though the more recent art post-reboot is honestly incredible. About the art being usually good enough, sometimes things will happen that are just impossible to interpret. For example, when Captain Awesome in chapter 3 gets combo attacked by Mega Maiden in the mech, what the hell is happening here? It both feels like I'm missing a page and also there's an extra page or something, like this page shouldn't even be here, and what's going on is just uninterpretable. In the same chapter, Captain Awesome knocks the same mech on the comic shop, though it took me a while to understand what was going on in the panel, and I still don't know if that's his head or foot because in the subsequent pages, the mech appears nowhere but behind Captain Awesome. Where the hell did this giant go in that time? This happens a lot where it feels like I'm missing a page or two or something when I'm just not. A less common but notable issue with the comic is its tendency to do the paneling error where on the left there's two panels, one on top, one below, and one big panel to the right. Usually it's safest to not do this array when making comics because do you go top left, right, and then bottom left, top left, bottom left, and then right, or do you just happen to skip bottom left? It's a bit confusing to follow sometimes depending on who you are, and it's a rather rookie mistake that I used to do a lot when I personally made comics, though in every case where I notice this paneling, it's always formatted as top left to bottom left to then right box, so at least it's consistent. This mistake persists occasionally even into pages of the reboot, which surprised me since everything else improved majorly. Humor plus dialogue. Though the comic was kind of funny sometimes at the start, the dialogue quickly becomes weighed down with crude, misplaced cursing, stupid sex jokes, and weird childish stock cartoon phrases. For an example of weird misplaced cursing, look at chapter 7 where the highly useless character Creeper McCreeperson says this. Or just when the other female characters of American's Right Team says that they named themselves Cockblock and Amazon Tits. Are you kidding me? Or when Mega Maiden said, "The name's Mega Maiden, bitch!" Like, did you really have to say bitch? All the cursing in this comic was childish and edgy as opposed to badass and mature, which bogs down the enjoyment for me personally as someone who hates unnecessary cursing. And given all the other issues, when an actually funny moment happens, it's harder to enjoy it because everything else around it is so terrible. Overall, plus when it gets good. This comic starts off horrible for the first 15 chapters. Starts getting a little promising by chapter 16, and then actually becomes good by chapter 21. You can actually say it gets better later, though this doesn't save the comic because if you do the math, there are 743 pages and ongoing of this comic as of writing, and it takes 393 pages to get to chapter 21, i.e. when it starts becoming something good. That's a whopping 52.8% of this comic being bad, and if we're talking about when it starts noticeably improving by chapter 16, then 39.7% of the comic being bad. If that percentage of anything else was bad, Be that a video game, another comic, movie, or cartoon or book, then people who enjoy that thing can validly say, sure, it gets good later, but most will still say that those pieces of media are bad because a slight majority of the time you'll be watching them or reading them, it suck. That's true for Mega Maiden, and even though there's a reboot, it's a soft reboot, meaning that the line of when it's rebooted isn't super clear, and some things before Season 3 or the reboot are still necessary to know moving into the reboot, so that you aren't confused. For example, if you just skipped to chapter 21, you'd have no idea who someone like Eric is, and him being the mayor of the city 20 years ago in chapter 31 would have no weight on you. Basically, if you don't read everything before chapter 21, you'd still probably be confused on a lot of things that aren't necessarily story destroying, but notable enough to cause serious confusion. For these reasons, I think that overall, this is technically a mixed bag since half of it is great, half of it sucks, which is why I still can't say it's a good comic. If it got worse later, then at least I could be disappointed instead of not even wanting to read the thing. And I say that because introductions and first chapters are the most important ones. And with the first 15 out of the currently 41 chapters of Mega Maiden being bad, I just can't in good faith suggest this comic or call it good, even though there's a point where it gets good. A better way to do this would have been to just do a hard reboot, like how Andeh hard rebooted his comic Shonen Punks from 20 years ago to Shonen Punks recently. That way, new readers wouldn't even have to read the previous stuff to understand what's happening, and the old version can remain as a legacy version where the creator first enacted his ideas. In short, half of this comic feels like the author just wanted to draw super sexy, hot superhero women doing stuff because he likes sexy hero women, and he decided, why not make a webcomic as well? So that he has an excuse to draw his favorite OC females doing stuff. Then he lost interest in the work and stopped in 2014, only to pick it back up in 2020 and majorly improve everything about it, though it was too late to actually stop the comic's main issues due to half of the comic already being bogged down by the previous mindset. Personally, I would have just moved on to making something new and better with my improved skills instead of polishing something with a cruddy foundation. I thought it'd be a good idea to actually review the content after the 393rd page, because that stuff, I kind of talk about it a little bit about how it's good and stuff like that, but I just read the entire comic, and so I feel like I have a good grasp on the quality of it, and I mean, I just read it. I'm breaking this up into two parts. The Golden Era, which is chapter 21 through 35 to 35 afterwards. So chapter 21 through 35 is Golden Era. So one, Liz and Garnet are here, and they're great characters. So Liz and Garnet are very interesting characters. They bounce off of each other very well, and their origin is very interesting. And it was a massive shame that they had to leave, because the author was like, okay, I guess narratively it makes sense for them to leave because they're from another multiverse and stuff like that. But if they just stayed as main characters, I really would not have minded that, because they're fun characters. And I liked, Liz was really funny, Garnet was really funny too, and they bounce off Dee Dee in them. And that's because they really needed to be in the story, and that's because, two, the comic suffered from not having enough main characters or cool enough characters. Liz and Garnet helped with that. So I didn't really go into this that much in the actual video before this point, but a big suffering point for the comic was the fact that they didn't have a lot of main characters or supporting characters. It was basically just Isis and Dee Dee doing stuff, and that can be fine if Isis and Dee Dee were very interesting, but the fact is that they just weren't very interesting for a lot of the story, and they weren't enough to really hold up the story. And the other supporting characters that we had, like American Riot, I guess, they were also really one note and kind of uninteresting and very basic. So Liz and Garnet really did help a lot with that by being interesting, by being new characters from a different origin, and by again bouncing off very well with our main characters. And also the humor was just great. So 3, the most interesting things were happening through chapter 21 and 35, like Mega Maiden become more of a support / background character, to Dee Dee becoming more equal with Mega Maiden in terms of power, to even the humor. So they had a whole arc where they went to the moon and then they went back to Earth, and it was 20 years later because moon time dilation in this world is just crazy, I guess. That was a very interesting arc. I thought they would stay basically in the future, but they just don't. I did enjoy seeing what the future was like. I thought that was very interesting because they're basically trying to restart from the future, like restart their whole lives from the future, but then Liz and Garnet allow them to go back into the past, and I assume that this is actually where the reboot is supposed to happen. I'm not exactly sure, but that's what I'm assuming. Don't quote me on that, okay? I just went by quality reboot, which would be like either chapter 16 or 21. Okay, but yeah, the most interesting stuff happens. This is easily the funniest part of the whole story. I was pretty much laughing like at every single joke that was written down. I was really enjoying myself during these. I was really enjoying myself reading this stuff during this part because the story was actually very funny and good. 4. Notable art improvements. So the art got way better during these parts, and even though it's better in 35 and 41, these notable art improvements include me being able to tell what's actually going on in scenes and me actually wanting to see fights. Beforehand, the art was so butt cheeks that it, well, not butt cheeks, but so primitive, I guess, in what Andeh could do, that it was like, okay, half the time I can't even understand what's going on during these fights, you know. So on to chapter 35 and 41. I said they're okay, but really I mean they're good. Okay. 0. This is something that needs to be understood now. Its main issue is that it constantly references pre-chapter 21 content all the time, so it assumes that you read that stuff, which hurts the comic in a meta sense. Now I say in a meta sense because it damages the comic outside of the comic itself. What it does is assume that you already read the first 393 pages. If you didn't read them, then a lot of the casual references that they make, a lot of the characters that come up, you won't understand the weight of them being there. You won't understand the references that they're making or what they're talking about, because they're referencing things that, world building things that were established in the first 393 pages that were just forgotten about for like 500 pages, and now they're referencing them again. So you have to actually go back and read this stuff so you are not confused if you didn't already read that stuff. And that stuff sucks. So in a meta sense, that damages the comic because you are lesser able to enjoy what's going on because you don't have the context of what happened previously. Which means that the comic itself is pretty good, but you'll still be confused by a lot of things if you have not read, again, the first 393 pages, and the comic tells you to go do that, and those pages are really rough and bad. 1, it goes to an episodic form, which feels strange. So a lot of the comic was serialized, basically be like a chapter happens and then the next chapter, it's the next direct events of what happened afterwards, or like a little time skip sometimes. Like there's one time like a 2-year time skip, one time like a month time skip, but basically it's serialized, so you have to read the chapter before to understand what's going on. 35 and through 41 seem to be setting up a kind of semi-episodic or just straight up episodic sort of thing where it's a villain of the week kind of thing. So you basically should effectively be able to just post 35, read whatever chapter, and understand what's going on a lot of the time within the context of knowing the previous chapters before 35, because that's how it's set up. I think this is kind of a strange change. It's not necessarily bad. Andeh actually does pretty good with the villain of the week kind of thing because he makes the characters funny, and honestly, just Didi and Isis are way better characters. They're more separate. They're more like actually characters. They're more like actually people. 2, there are basically no stakes anymore, so our characters will just do bad shit. Like, for example, Isis punches a villain out into the street and they get hit by a bus, and Didi's like, okay, let's run. Instead of calling the police or like, I don't know, feeling bad, they just run and they don't care. Didi stomps the face in of a villain, a speedster, while she's down, by the way, to knock her out. Probably could have killed her. Didi chops the head off of the multiplier girl without knowing if one of them was the actual prime original version, so she might have killed her. And they just do shit like this like all the time. Like they're actually rookie bad heroes. Like, not rookies, but they're bad at being heroes still. They're bad at being heroes and nothing bad happens to them because of it. There aren't any stakes right now. The biggest stakes is Didi and Mega Maiden's disagreement on if Nega Maiden's a good person or not. So 3, Liz and Garnet are gone. Even though Didi and Isis are better characters now, they were so funny and recognizable that their presence not being there is unfortunate. So Liz and Garnet were just great characters. They bounce off of each other. They're very simple, but they're good characters. I like how they talk to Didi and Mega Maiden, but they're not here anymore, and it's just Isis and Didi now. Isis and Didi are way better characters, as I've already said, but their presence will definitely be missed, I think. If this comic has some kind of secret fan base that I don't know about, then they're probably fan favorite characters during the time. 4, a good thing that Andeh does in this comic is make Mega Maiden and Chop Chop both be on the same level, and it makes them both feel like the low tier heroes they are always supposed to be. As I said earlier, they suck at being heroes. They're basically like rookies, even though by this point of the story they really shouldn't be. But I don't really mind it that much because the story's actually funny and I like their characters and I like who they are. Isis has a lot of her flaws, like being lazy or getting angry really easily when she shouldn't. And Dee Dee has flaws like being way too violent and instead of like before where they're just invited to top superhero groups like all the time, like American Riot Group, they just work with them for no reason. Instead of them being invited to these random guys, even though they definitely didn't deserve it, they're never invited with these random guys. Instead, it's like they're friends with them, but they're not in their groups by this point anymore. And I think that was a really good decision, because I think it's completely fine to have friends who are top tier heroes and not be a top tier hero who's respected around yourself. That makes a lot more sense for what Andeh was going for, as opposed to like them just being Mary Sue's, because they're not Mary Sue's. They don't get whatever they want. Final takeaway: at the end of the day, to understand a lot of what's casually referenced in post chapter 34, or similarly for a lot of things that happen post chapter 21, you need to read the first 393 pages of a comic. You just have to. And even if you skip to when it starts getting good at around chapter 16, you still will be missing early stuff that's referenced a lot in later chapters. The story still suffers in a meta sense due to these earlier chapters both being important and bad. So the continued importance of the first 393 pages damages the comic because it's a soft reboot. You still need to read all that stuff to understand a bit what's happening, even if a lot of things are retconned in the later parts of the story. If you don't read that stuff, you'll be confused on a lot of things that the characters casually mention, and that will damage your understanding of what's going on. And I still think that it's definitely advantageous to read those first parts, and that really sucks because, again, those parts suck. I mean, you just watched like a 35-minute video of me explaining on why those parts suck, like so you know those parts suck. And a better decision would have definitely been to just make a hard reboot. Like, you don't need to keep all of that. You could just make a hard reboot and reintroduce what you want to and retcon specific things so that you don't even ever need to read those first parts. Just restart the whole story and tell it better. Conclusion: thanks for watching the scripted portion of this video. I've been showing edited clips of when I first reacted to reading the comic and that joke comic that I made probably. And I thought it would be a good idea to, instead of what I did before, combine the funny reaction to this comic and the analytical video into the same thing, and also partially so that the watch time is higher. If you want to stick around for the funny stuff, then go ahead and stick around, because technically the video's not over yet. So far, basically, this comic is about two superhero women who just met and became best friends, and they're just doing their superhero stuff, and they're like unknown, low level kind of heroes that aren't being taken seriously. I've had a few issues with the comic so far, but I don't think it's that bad. I was just reading this, and there's some specific dialogue and also important context that's completely necessary to understand this stuff. So there's this guy named Captain Awesome, and he's super powerful, right? He's like one of the most powerful heroes, but he's like a freak. He's like a freakophile, basically. He touched on this. He groped this girl, one of the girls or something like that. So you know that he's a jerk, but he's also known as a hero locally as like a big guy. And these guys are nobodies. They've not beaten any villains or anything. And this is the top hero group. Why are these guys, after beating a probably honestly like weak guy, it was like this robot guy or whatever, it kind of feels like things are happening really fast in this comic. Like, maybe we should have had some sort of period where the characters are like getting more well known, they're beating more villains, maybe they lose a few times and then they get invited to the top hero group. This is absurd. I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. And also at the same time, the super awesome guy, everyone openly just collectively thinks that he's a jerk. Like how is he the top hero, but all the heroes know that he's a jerk? So why don't they just like tell the civilians or something that this guy's a freak? Like, I don't exactly understand that. Just tell the civilians that he's a jerk if you already know he's a jerk, and that's why you're not allowing him into the group. I don't know if this is nitpicky, but it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any, even if it's a comedic like story, it doesn't make any sense, bro. Like, it has to make some sense, bro. And plus, she says, besides, we wanted someone who likes to punch bad guys as much as we do. You don't know these motherfuckers. Like, you don't know these people. So basically, this guy here is explaining that the lone superheroes, they can just do whatever they want. But super teams have divided areas of the city that they have to protect. And this one is like, I'll help you out. And then they're like, oh wow, this is awesome. I'm so happy for this opportunity. Bro, you have barely done shit. It's page 33 and you're at the top hero suit. I still can't. They literally have a recorded account of them attacking civilians. They attack civilians in the start. They literally attack civilians because they thought the guy was a villain when he was just being in a movie. He was just playing a movie in a movie set. And these costumes too, like, what are these costumes, bro? This is not gonna protect you at all from anything. He's like, I'm gonna make you bulletproof. Bro, what? Look at all the skin. Like, you're gonna get shot and you're gonna die. Like, you can just get shot in the neck and instantly die. Like, I don't know. Like, this is not gonna help you. Okay, so we have this freaky ass villain character. Freaky. I don't know what is up with this artist, but I feel like he was making half of this comic with one hand. Like, maybe that's why he stopped adding color to his pages. I don't know. Your abilities, is this where she says? Yeah, your ability, this is how you became the first sentient biomachine. So his ability basically is to make machines sentient. I want you to create me a machine that will turn posthumans into my slaves. So what I don't understand is why didn't this guy already, how is this not a top villain? This guy can just sit in a lab all day and make machines all day for months and months and months, just make a robot army and make sentient robots that are just loyal to him to make more robots. Like, he could just do that. He could just do that and be the top. He could be top tier. He can just give them any ability. Like, and can he do that to airplanes and stuff? Clocked work. Give it up. Heh, how funny, Mega Maiden, because you're too late. The device that lets me control machines is on my hand already. The plane is in place and the towers! Clocked work. No! He raises his hand up. The airplane becomes sentient and he fucking flies it into a tower. He can just be so broken, but for some reason he's a weakling. Like, again, this is what I mean by one hand, bro. Like, freaky ass character. So now he for some reason he is subservient to this person who knows a lot of things. She says, create me a machine that will turn all posthumans into my mindless slave. Basically, a posthuman is someone with superpowers. Also, I have no idea who this guy is. I don't know. My assumption is that this is her, right? And she's transforming into this being, but thing is that he wasn't shown off previously at all. Sometimes this comic is just confusing, like, what's going on. Like, I don't know what, like, I make comics too, so as an author sometimes I'll make a scene that just doesn't make any sense to the people who are reading it sometimes, but then I'll go back and I'll really read it over and make sure that I can remake it so it makes sense. This guy just never, like, who is this guy? Like, he's clearly not this guy. He's not this guy. Like, who the fuck is this guy, bro? All right, so here's something that annoyed me. So I've already read that. I pre-read this. So this guy, as I was talking about, who we don't see, I thought it was her transforming, but I don't know. He just comes out of nowhere, right? And he just is a villain, and then he destroys stuff, right? And he just wants to cause damage because he's crazy. So basically, it's been established that they can see things going on. They can see that things are blowing up and getting crazy. As this guy's going crazy, he's like evil. He's like Hulk or something. He throws a freaking ATM at a baby, and then this guy comes in. New hero. He was on the cover. The American Riot, that's his name, right? So he saves this infant. By the way, these guys can see them, so they're either running to the scene or they're watching this happen. So they definitely can see what's going on here. American Riot saves this baby and then gives it back to this dad, and they actually have kind of a funny joke. The baby's Canadian from South Park. That's actually pretty funny. So what happens after that is American Riot starts fighting this guy and he kicks him in the face, right? And our girl, I think her name is Isis. I can't believe I forgot her name. Bro, I'm reading this and I forgot her name. Isis, I think it's Isis. So Isis comes in and thinks American Riot somehow is a bad guy when he's smiling at her saying, oh, fellow defenders of justice. Bro, you guys had a bird's eye view of what was happening and you guys were coming here and you mistake him for a villain. And she's like, haha, take that, super criminal, when he's not getting up to fight her. So that was very retarded. That makes absolutely no sense. So now the obviously evil guy has a little bit of the jump on them, but basically they're very easily able to dodge this guy. Somehow this girl who summons axes and stuff, which was inherited by her dad, Thunder Axe or something, she summons these axes to throw in his body. So somehow, I don't know what kind of superhero training she's got, but previously she has gotten no professional training, nothing like that. We have not seen any backstory where she's a super fighter. Same as Isis, actually. She just got superpowers. She literally, her origin was that she was a nerd who was super skinny. So she didn't work out. She didn't do any physical exercise. She's just a nerd who was skinny. So but at least her superpowers make up for her being skinny and weak and not really knowing how to fight, right? But with this character, it doesn't really make any sense. So we don't know why she's so good at fighting and everything, but she summons these axes and cuts up this off-brand Hulk. And then Isis, this is actually how it's layered. This is page 43. It's 44, 43, 44. Like, we don't see Isis say anything. She's not getting more powerful or something. And it's been established that now she can fly. So she grabs this guy up. This is so bullshit. She grabs this guy, flies up into the atmosphere, and punches him out into space. This feels like I'm missing something. Like, there should be pages in between these pages or something. But I'm not. This is just how it's layered. Recap. They have a bird's eye view. They see what's going on. Isis can fly. So assumingly, she's flying down there and she has super abilities. Assumingly, that I also am assuming that she has like super sight or something, because she has all physical abilities enhanced. So she can super sight see this guy, save somebody, somehow misunderstands him as a criminal even though he's being nice, and then she does like jack shit, right? Like, her power is kind of ass. Well, it's not ass. If you're fighting a normal guy, like, that's pretty bad. But her power in this situation is not so hot. So she can now fly. She's never flown before. There's no like startup panels of her preparing to fly, get this guy or anything. She just flies up in the atmosphere and throws this guy out, and that's the end of the battle. Actually nonsense. And then the girls go back to her place, and this was one of the lamest pieces of dialogue I've ever seen in my life. And I'm starting to feel like, look, this criticism is common, but Mary Sue type shit. This is what it is. Isis says, I don't mean to sound cocky, but so far all these baddies have been kind of weak sauce. By the way, only 3 right now. They've only fought 3 bad guys. 3 bad guys, and yet they're in the top superhero. I'm still bothered about that. 3 bad guys, and they're in the top superhero league, and they're incompetent, as we saw with her attacking a hero just now, who just saved a child. But no, kind of cocky. These villains have been weak sauce, and one of them was actually just a civilian that you just harmed for no good reason. You probably broke his back or something by throwing him into a wall. Threw a freaking table at the guy. Like, he didn't deserve that. And what the person of the top hero group says is, it's not that they're easy, Isis, it's that you guys make a really good team. Lame. 48 pages in, and our heroes have not at all had a single struggle with any villain. Nobody's dangerous. Isis just seems broken. So, and it's not even like the funniest comic in the whole world. It's not even like the funniest comic in the whole world or anything. And the thing is too, which confuses me mostly, is that it kind of has a little bit of a story to it. So if it has a little bit of a story to it, if you want the story to be interesting, you need some stakes. Which, to establish stakes, you need to show that the villains are actually kind of scary. Immediately what I think of is a comic that's like this is Analog and D-Pad, where you guys probably haven't read that, even though it's really good, by Tim Buckley. They introduced ZK as an actual threatening guy. Like, Ethan constantly dies him, Lucas has a hard time beating him, and especially after they become friends, they don't want to Lucas could probably kill him, but they don't want to kill him because they become friends. That comic is just way more intelligent. It's funny, and it takes things, it goes in a lot of very interesting specific directions with like the ramifications of their powers, stuff like that. This comic is just like these mid-ass heroes, low-tier heroes get to be the top heroes, and it's so easy for them or whatever. Like, shit is lame. And it's supposed to be like a serialized sort of story. But what I think this is, right, here's my assumption. What I think that this is that I've been reading the description sometimes, and the author writes a lot in the descriptions that he just likes to see his girls, personalities, right? And I guess that's why they're kind of Mary Sue. If you asked me, I couldn't describe these characters. Even though I've read 50 pages of the comic, I couldn't even basic describe them to you in basic terms, like with 1-word terms. I couldn't do it.